Hi everyone, good morning. I see lots of friends and familiar faces, and thank you very much for Plasticity for the opportunity. I just want to acknowledge the incredible speakers we had earlier before me, and also all the knowledge and insights we have in this room. I'm here to share as much as I'm here to learn. So I just want to say that the date over here was 18th October because that's when I put the slides together. Fortunately, nothing has changed since then. So that's the good news. So what I'm going to share is still true as it is. I've got a quick quiz question before I begin. Can I have a quick shout out for people who can answer this question? In a 2015 research, how many ASEAN countries were there in the top 10 of the countries which leak most amount of plastics? Any show of hands? 9. Wow, okay. 6, close. 1, okay. 5, yeah, that's right. 5's the right answer. Unfortunately, the YTL prizes are not for this. So the answer is 5 indeed. So we have the top 5 of these countries, of the top 10 countries are from ASEAN. So that's the reason why we're really here today. And that's also the reason why we are doing a lot of our work over here in ASEAN. So just a quick introduction to our company. We are a research and strategy advisory company. We work a lot with packaging consumer goods companies as well as city governments to help them understand what happens to the waste after it leaves the hands of the consumer. So we spend a lot of our time on the ground collecting primary data, speaking with post-consumer value chains, right from waste collectors, recycling pickers, formal and informal sector, as well as the aggregators, junk shops, right down to the recyclers. And in the meantime, we also try and collect a lot of insights from government agencies across different parts of ASEAN, as well as from India. So while we work behind the scenes, there's a number of things that we put our services together in 4 distinct chunks. So one is the research and data analytics piece. And through that, through our primary research, we then focus on advisory. And we also take on certain special projects, for instance, on gender, which we put under technical assistance, so, which is basically the role of gender in waste management. And then finally, stakeholder engagement. So we try and really share a lot of our research publicly as much as possible. So just want to highlight a couple of our recently published research. So we were commissioned to do a regional work by Coca-Cola. And once again, thanks for Coca-Cola for the opportunity, where we were mapping the post-consumer flow of PET bottles as well as aluminum cans in 6 countries in Southeast Asia. So what this tries to do is to come up with a baseline rate for PET collection, as well as the amount of PET which ends up in the environment or ends up in the landfills. So the idea behind this is to really share this information with the industry so we can all come together to look at concrete solutions for next steps. Another piece of work on the flexibles that we did about a year ago was with Amcor. So flexibles is a very interesting topic because it commands, it's going to reach about $222 billion in market value globally by 2020. And to put that in perspective, that's the size of the Vietnamese economy. And over 40% of that is going to come from Asia. So a lot of the packaging industry, consumer goods industry, do not have a good insight as to what really happens to these flexible plastic once it leaves the hands of the consumer in developing countries. So that's what we helped put together, both coming up with ideas and insights on what's happening on the collection side. Are there good initiatives to collect post-consumer flexible plastics, as well as to recycle it as well. So over the last 6 years of operation, especially in the last 4 years, we've been going out then collecting data points across over 10 countries in Southeast Asia, as well as in India. And this includes a number of different meetings as well as events that we have organized. So whatever you're seeing over the next few slides is a result of on-ground work that we have done. So in ASEAN, we like to contextualize the problem into 3 circles, which are all subsets of each other. So when we look at plastic pollutions, we saw that the top 5 ASEAN countries, the top 10 countries that put most amount of plastics in the ocean are from ASEAN. But that's within a bigger context of post-consumer plastic. So it's really important to address post-consumer plastic, and even that is within the issue of waste management. Of course, design is a very important part of it, but from a waste management point of view, we look at post-consumer plastic and as an important part of the puzzle. So just to bring your attention to a really great piece of work, in fact, that came out just a few weeks ago, is by the World Bank. So this is the Water Waste 2.0. It's a continuation of the first report that was published in 2012. And it's at a global level, so it really brings together data points from across the world on waste management. And one key insight from this is that today, most low-income countries are spending about 20% of the municipal budgets on solid waste management. And yet, over 90% of that is basically getting either dumped into open dump sites or it's getting burnt. So 20% of a city's budget is going, in low-income countries, is typically going into a linear model, which is not even being dealt with environmentally friendly. So we have got a long way to go to achieve circularity. So to give you an idea of the work that we have done recently, this is the Greater KL PET flow. So we looked at 100% of the PET bottles that enter into KL, and what we found out is that about 67% of that is typically ending up in landfills, and about 23%, that's on the right corner, which is junk shops, is what's getting recycled, and about 10% is entering into the environment. So we've done similar work across ASEAN, and it's given us a lot of insights on what is typically happening today in the PET value chain. So these slides are not quite covering it. Okay, it is covering it over here, so that's great. So this is an idea of waste management numbers in Southeast Asia. So from 2016 to 2030, the top 3 countries, or the top 5 countries are, I've put it in red over here. So Cambodia and Laos are going to see the maximum amount of increase in percentage. But in terms of sheer tonnage, it's Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, and as well as Thailand, which are going to have the most amount of tons of municipal solid waste created. So throughout our work, we have observed a few visible challenges, right? So while we look at data, it's also important to see what do we really see on the ground. So one clear example is overflowing landfills. So we see that across ASEAN countries, a number of landfills are either already full or they are essentially just dump sites. So this is a photo we took about a year and a half ago. It's a traffic jam of waste trucks entering Bantagabang landfill out in the outskirts of Bekasi in Greater Jakarta. And this is not an uncommon thing to see across a few places in Southeast Asia. The second point is missing infrastructure. So in a really excellent report by the Ocean Conservancy called The Next Wave, which came out in 2017, they calculated that the net loss per metric ton for some of these economies in Southeast Asia in terms of municipal waste management is about $8 to $25. Another reality is a very fragmented approach to waste management. So typically we see a number of different government agencies or ministries who are involved in waste management at the same time. So it typically tends to create a lot of confusion amongst the packaging and waste management industry in terms of who exactly do they really need to deal with and who is controlling the policy. A fourth point is missing data. So what we see is that a number of different countries have done some good research, but it's not all done at the same time. So it's really hard to look at it from a regional perspective. And also the definitions are often quite different. And then finally, there's a lot of, there's a big informal sector that's here in ASEAN as well. So we see that the informal sector often ends up recycling about 45% of the waste that's generated. And they play a very, very important role in taking this, in taking the lead on recycling. And finally, there is also lack of segregation regulations, or if the regulations are there, then they're not often enforced very well. And I just want to end by giving a quick idea on what the informal sector today looks like. So these are a few photos that we took on the ground just a few months ago. So we like to break down the informal sector into 4 different types. So one is the waste collector. So these are people who are partially employed by the governments, by the city governments, and they also collect the plastics and recyclables to then sell. The second is the recycling pickers. So these are entrepreneurs who make a living completely out of selling recyclables. And then junk shops. These are essentially hole-in-the-wall shops in around corners of housing societies. And then finally, you have scavengers who work directly in the landfills. So in conclusion, there is a very thriving economic activity that's happening in the informal sector, and there is a big need for better data collection in this region. And also there is an increasing need for harmonization of design and recycling standards, as we've seen in the last few presentations. Thank you very much.